Yo, what's up everybody? This is Sugi Shogun here with a brand new review again, and this time I decided to watch another long-running shonen after I was done with Black Clover. And this one I started already back in 2009, and somewhere down the line I decided to drop it due to lack of interest. But now after all these years I decided to give it another shot and finally complete it. And basically that anime in question is Fairy Tail. And there will be some minor spoilers in this review after I have explained the premise of this series. So in case you don't want to know anything, maybe not the review for you. Mostly for people who have watched already a couple of episodes, seasons, or arcs, or have already completed this anime. But I'm happy to talk with all the people and argue about the points that I'm going to be making. But let's start with the premise of this series. So it takes place in a fantasy land known as Fiore, where magic basically exists as an essential part of people's everyday lives. So pretty much all people in the world can use some type of a magic, and there's different types of magic. Some people can manipulate fire, ice, rain, water. Some people can conjure items. Some people can transform into different things. Some people use dark magic, light magic. There's all types of things really in this world. There's not really like a hardcore hard magic system ingrained into this series, so there's not like a way to measure people's power levels or Furoku level that you have in Shaman King, for example. So people just say that, oh, this guy has amazing magic level or something, but it's a very kind of like abstract and not really settled down. So it's a bit more of a light magic type of a system that Hiro Mashima, the mangaka artist, basically created on Fairy Tail. And in Fiore, you have countless magic guilds, which are basically they are guilds which take basically quests from people, villages, and other mages to do types of things, lost treasures, or deal with dark guilds, which are kind of like the villains on this series, or some type of monsters. And basically Fairy Tail is the main guild which this series basically focuses on. There's other guilds obviously which are explored and a bit more on the side rails, so to speak. And the two there's basically four main characters, two which are a bit more of the main, which is Natsu, who is basically searching his lost father, which is or foster father, a dragon named Igneel. The dragons play a big part in the lore and everything around this series, and Igneel basically taught Natsu this sort of a dragon slayer magic, which has to do with a lot of fire. And then you have Lucy Heartfilia, which is a celestial magic. She can open these keys, which basically open the zodiac. So there's kind of like an interesting mystic element there to that. And so basically it's a summoner of sorts. And then you have Gray, which is this sort of ice magician. And then you have Erza, which is sort of this knight, which can transform into different types of knight armor. So that's kind of like the premise of this series, and they go into different quests, and there's kind of like unrevealing the mystery behind the dragons, and getting trouble with the dark mages or the dark wizards, or whatever you want to call them, really, black wizards and dark guilds. And that's where kind of like most of the series revolves around, and finding these lost dragons, so to speak, and what basically happened in the past to make them disappear. Now that we have kind of gone through the bit of the premise, I want to finally get into my own thoughts about this series. Now, let's kind of start with some good points. Now, the studios that worked on the first season was A1 Pictures and Satellite. A1 Pictures actually worked on all of the 3 seasons, and they did a pretty great job. I think a lot of the special effects, which are done like bit of a CGI, these are not drawn animations of fire or other types of magic. Some of them were drawn animations, some were not, but like Natsu's, all the dragon effects are like special effects, which are basically done by the studio's 3D department. Now, I think these were pretty good for their time. I think they have stand through the test of time. I mean, the series started in 2009, and you could definitely see the HD quality in the last season especially. It's a lot more higher resolution, a lot more clean than the first 2 seasons, for example. So this is definitely a series that has, gone a lot better in terms of its animation quality over time, and so have many others like Naruto or One Piece, for example. The technology technology has gone better. And I think for a series that has been running for over 300 episodes, it is a pretty impressive animation quality, and I didn't really feel at any time that this was lacking in any form of animation in this series. And that's a very impressive because usually these weekly running shonen sometimes really drop the ball in terms of the animation quality. You have these like low budget episodes now and then, but this was really never the case with Fairy Tail in my opinion. So in terms of the animation perspective, it's been pretty solid from start to finish. Now let's talk a bit about Hiro Mashima. And he is the creator of Fairy Tail. He previously did the Rave anime, which some people are also aware, which was, a semi-big series, which also has anime, but it was not completed through. And now he has a new series called Eden Zero. Now, on my old channel, I had a video where I talked about self-plagiarism. And that is where an artist basically self-plagiarizes their previous work and just distorts it a little and presents it as like a new character design. And some famous examples of this, in my opinion, are Akira Toriyama, the creator of Full Metal Alchemist, can't remember her name right now, and Hiro Mashima, because there are a lot of characters which absolutely look extremely similar in all of these three series, and he's basically copy-pasting them over, maybe changing the color of the hair and shape a bit, and voila, you got a new character. And I don't think that's very original, and I think always you have to have this frame of reference. When you're reviewing anime, you have to always compare it to the previous works. Is he recycling the same types of arcs and storytelling as in the previous anime? Is he doing something new, or does he just like change the setting from sci-fi to fantasy, which he kind of did with Eden Zero, which is more like a sci-fi one, while Fairy Tail is actually rooted into fantasy. So these are like legit criticisms that you can put into anime, and I think that was a big problem. For a lot of people, especially those who have seen all the three series, can definitely see that he is using a lot of the same designs. Now, other problem of Hiro has always been he's not a great story writer. That's just a fact. He's not really good at character development specifically, and just reading a good plot is just not in his strong wheel. And what I would do as Mashima would just do the art and the designs and get another person to write the story for you. And you had combinations like these with Death Note. You had a great artist coming along with a great writer, and voila, you created one of the best anime of all time. So there's fundamentally a lot of differences when you bring on another person to write the story, because I just have to be giving it out. Mashima is not a great writer, and that's something I want to talk about next. Two of his major biggest flaws in this series. Now, number one is, well, there's actually three problems, but let's start with number one. So Fairy Tail has around, give and take, 20 arcs or so, but the arcs always follow this sort of a similar format every single time, which is a new arc starts. Our main trio or 5-6 people of Fairy Tail adventure a different place, and there they will be meeting a new set of 5-6 enemies. And out of those 5-6 enemies, one converts and joins to Fairy Tail, and everybody else is like literally forgotten afterwards. And then the next arc starts, and they bring another new 5 enemies, and then the next arc and 5 new enemies. And this is something that obviously happens in One Piece a lot too, but there are times where you could argue that maybe you want to build like enemies which are going to be becoming more frequent. Like, let's say in Boku no Hero Academia, you have the Shigaragi or whatever is his name, which is a villain that is shown being built on the backside, on the limelight. Out of the limelight, he's like showing up and growing as a villain. And this is not something you see in Fairy Tail, like a long-running villain on the sideways. And in One Piece, you obviously have Blackbeard, and you kind of see these enemies growing up at the same time as the heroes go. So you kind of like have this like a underlying, build up for the main villain and the main hero to basically eventually fight. And yes, you have that enemy in this series known as Zeref, But I mean, he as a villain design, I gotta give it to you, a bit of an emo, not really, at no point I felt him menacing or real deal. It just felt extremely weak of opponent throughout the whole series, and it was really hard to, you know, consider him as a villain. And then there's also this sort of a sympathy for the devil storylines for almost all the villains in this series. So somehow every villain, you know, turns out to be good in the end, or they're redeemed or something like that. You don't need to have redemption storylines for all bad characters, and this is something you should be using very little, in fact. So there's a lot of that sort of a repetitive aspect in this series. Yes, you have a one tournament arc, but you have no like training arcs, that which are very normal to shonen shows. And all the training arcs that happen in this series are basically time skips or something, so they don't basically show anything of that. And I don't like it because Hero always does these random power-ups middle of the fights, and this is another problem where I feel like Natsu is a bit of a Gary Stu type of a character, while Erza is a Marisu. So they like feel they've been cut down, blasted down, and somehow they just climb up again, and then they do some random uppercut punch at the main villain, and the main villain is like KO'd immediately. So there's like these random power-ups which don't really add up to the story, and these characters never lose either. You have a lot of long-running shonen shows. Let's say Goku even loses a lot in Dragon Ball, many times actually, and that's an important part of character development, and you just don't see that with the characters in Fairy Tail. Yes, they have this sort of emotional tantrums that they say over and over again, but that kind of gets you only so far, and that's just really my fundamental problem with Fairy Tail, that I just felt that there wasn't like enough of this real justified character power-ups, and it just felt like so unreal that the good guys would win these bad guys, because it just gave you sort of a appearance that this would be so impossible. But these random power-ups and the will of the friendship, it kind of got old really, really fast, and this was the main reason I dropped it initially, probably around the Tenro arc, which is before the time skip. And what else do we have? So those are kind of like the main condensed problems of Fairy Tail. If these were actually addressed and fixed, this would have been an amazing series. Now, the very last point, which Hero is really bad of, is he kind of kills off characters, and people in the series, in the guild, think, oh, they're dead. And then they suddenly come back to life again by some bullshit reason, which doesn't add up at all. And this was really annoying, because sometimes you have to kill off characters to kind of raise up the stakes and show that there's a real deal going on, that somebody can die in this war, somebody can die in this battle. And other shonens have done that. I won't obviously go into spoilers now, but I'll give you a lot of examples where, you know, a lot of the good guys died, and very important, all elderly characters died, and that was a big significant build-up for a next fight or the war or something like that. And you just didn't see that in Fairy Tail even once. I think there was like a one character which considered like semi-good, like literally died. So like nobody really dies in this series, not even the bad guys to a degree. So that was a huge problem. But kind of like finishing up my thoughts here. So despite its flaws, I think it did indeed build emotional connection with me. There's kind of a lot less fillers than a lot of other running shonens. The quality was good. Obviously, we have to praise the OST. The OST is very strong. A lot of good OPs and EDs included in this series as well. So musically, it's a very, very high quality, and I think that really puts on that, you know, emotional plus in a lot of these moments. And if, you know, Fairy Tail had a different writer, and basically it kind of does now, because the sequel series is done by another person now, but the Fairy Tail 100-Year Quest, which is probably coming out at some point, and I'm going to be watching it, and I'm going to be reviewing it, but I definitely felt that Fairy Tail, in the end of the day, could have been a lot better series if they had done certain fixing on character development, and, you know, actually some people dying, and the arcs were a bit of rearranged and had a bit of a, you know, a variety on them, because it just felt like, you know, copy paste over and over again the same format, and this is not fun for the most part. but I still, you know, consider it a decent shonen. It's definitely worth its ratings. It's a bit long, obviously, or technically not, but I think especially the final season was pretty good. I think that was one of the best fights that you could see on the series. A lot of fan service with a lot of older villains and older characters coming back again. But yeah, it's just I wish you know, some things were a bit different with this series, but I don't know if Eden Zero is any different. Gonna be giving that a shot also, but and reviewing that later on. But thanks for watching, guys. See you guys on the next review. Cheers.